Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Mario is Missing, brought to us by Software Toolworks. Mario is Missing is one of the infamous educational Mario titles that came out during the mid-90s. Released for the Super Nintendo, the original NES, as well as computer systems, Mario is Missing seems like a cool concept at first, with Luigi taking the helm as the main character as Mario has been kidnapped by Bowser. However, quickly you'll find out that it is an edutainment game, and your goal is actually to visit many cities of the world and return certain objects to their correct location. Every city you'll travel to has 3 items for you to find and collect and then return to their right location, answering some trivia along the way. The game is basically a geography game disguised as a Mario game. So here we go with Mario is Missing for the Super Nintendo. After the opening story, you'll get control of Luigi inside of Bowser's castle. The castle is broken up into multiple floors, with one of the Koopalings taking control of each of the floors. You don't have to battle all of the Koopalings, thankfully, throughout the course of the game. However, you will have to go through every one of the doors on a given floor in order to then battle the Koopaling and then move up to the next floor. In order to complete the door, you'll travel to a city. You'll have to locate all the items by stomping on the heads of Koopa Troopas, collect the item, and then deliver it back to one of the information kiosks that are spread throughout the city. One of the things I actually do like about the game, though, is the map system that you can use to locate all of the items. When you pull up the map, you'll get to see where all the locations of the Koopa Troopas are, and then your goal is, of course, to travel there, stomp on them, and after you find all 3 bags, you don't have to destroy any more of the Koopa Troopas. You just have to make sure you get the ones that actually have the items. Every time I've played, the Koopa Troopas and their items are located in the same places, so I was able to easily find them each time I ended up playing through. At any point, once you've collected all the artifacts, or just at the beginning, whatever you like to do, you'll have to go to your global later, located in your menu, and then you'll get to control Yoshi on the giant world map, and as you can see, it's just like Super Mario World. Probably the most exciting thing, trust me, about this game overall. You then have to move Yoshi to the correct location. Once you're on the spot, you can then exit out of the map, and all of a sudden, Luigi will be riding Yoshi. The reason for this is in order to go to the information kiosk, in order to locate and place the items back where they're supposed to go, you have to be on the back of Yoshi because Luigi is too short. Then you'll go up to one of the information kiosks, answer a trivia question like, who painted the Sistine Chapel, and then you'll have to answer a second question right afterwards. Thankfully, the questions are the same every single time, so you'll easily be able to know what they are, or you can just look them up online, or just trial and error. Either way, you can't fail as long as you eventually get them correct. You'll return the item to its right location, and then be able to go to the next item kiosk. You have to also make sure in the menu you have the correct item selected so that you'll be able to interact with the kiosk. If you try to return the wrong item to a different kiosk, you'll just get an error message basically from the information desk, and then you'll have to select a different item. The fact that Luigi can't actually communicate with these information desks without the use of Yoshi is really kind of odd, but I guess they wanted to make sure that you knew what city you were located in, instead of just finding the items and just randomly placing them until you got everything correct. Once you have put all the items back, you then have to go back to the pipe in which you entered, go through it, you'll get a job well done screen, rack up some points, as well as get a password. You'll then be dumped back into Bowser's castle, and then you gotta go through the next door. Rinse and repeat until you completed the game. Next up, we're going to be traveling to Beijing, China. One of the more annoying things, though, about the game will be just traveling throughout the city. You'll have to consistently pull up the map until you've kind of memorized things, and once you've gotten to that point, well, then I guess you're me, because I've spent way too much time memorizing and writing down notes and maps for Mario is Missing. The things I do sometimes in order to complete some of these really obscure old classic games is just kind of ridiculous. Either way, traveling through the city, one of the things that makes it annoying is because there are so many streets. Looking at the map, you'll make sure that you have to go down the right sidewalks, and yes, you can't go down the middle of the street. If you try to, you'll just get a car beeping at you, and this goes for whether or not you're on Yoshi or on foot. The animation of running or just having to wait sometimes for a citizen or Koopa Troopa to walk by you so then you can actually travel down that sidewalk does end up getting quite time-consuming and just a nuisance overall. After finding all 3 of the items, we have the Great Wall of China. Yes, the Great Wall of China somehow is in the bag that we've gotten, and now we're able to deliver it by answering a few of the trivia questions. Like I said, they're the same questions every time. I'm not going to really go into the details, some of which I knew, some of which I just had to guess until I ended up getting right. There was no sense in even looking the answers up online since you can't fail or die or game over for getting the questions wrong. My goal while playing through the game was to find the locations of the items as quickly as possible and return them as quickly as possible so that I could get the heck out of that city and move on to the next city. Here we have to return the Forbidden City, or at least the gate of the Forbidden City, the Heavenly Gate. Either way, drop that off at the palace, and now we can head off to deliver the last of the items so that we can finish up Beijing. After traveling down a few streets, there it is, and I'm able to drop off the last of the items, and then I just have to now get back to the pipe in order to move on. Like before, Beijing is now complete, and we get a little bit of points as well as a password in case you don't feel like completing the game all in one go. Trust me, I don't blame you if you don't want to complete the game period, let alone all in one single go here. Traveling through the next door, we now move on to the next city. I do think some of the backgrounds as well as some of the architecture that is throughout the cities themselves actually ends up being pretty nice. I mean, I'm not going to say they're stellar by any means, but at least it gives a different look and feel to the various cities that we will be traveling to throughout the game. Since I have 2 of the items and one of the items can be delivered right where I am, I might as well now pull up the globulator and go over, and it's actually Nairobi, Kenya is actually where we're located now. One of the more obscure, I guess, cities that is located in the game. And if you look throughout the map, there's actually a lot of spots on the world map that could have possibly been in the game. Thankfully, not all of them are actually included, or else the game would pretty much go on forever, but I do think it's kind of cool that it shows you a lot of those locations and gives you an okay premise of where they actually are located in the world, but since the map is a little bit obscure, using the Super Mario World graphics, the educational value of actually remembering where these locations are is going to be a bit difficult. Honestly, back in the early 90s, I would have been much more satisfied just watching episodes of Carmen Sandiego, the game show, in order to try to figure out locations rather than playing Mario is Missing. But like many, I rented this game solely because it was a Mario title. The item we're dropping off now is actually one of the creepier items. It's actually a skull, which is supposed to represent like the earliest human fossils, and since that was found around Nairobi, Kenya, that's why it ends up being one of the 3 items available for this city. Some of the item choices overall are a bit weird, especially the infamous ones for New York City that we'll be getting to much later in the game, including King Kong, which is just really weird to kind of have in an educational game, especially considering the game was mostly sold to North American kids, so having the fact that King Kong was an item for that makes it seem like King Kong was actually an historical event. I can't imagine kids actually believing that, but then again, as a young kid, I believed a lot of crazy stuff. One of the other weird things, though, is that you leave Yoshi behind, and he just gets shut in behind the stone wall that falls down once you end up completing a stage. I guess you just keep getting new Yoshis every single time you make it to a new city, and that Yoshi just ends up stuck behind a wall and starves to death? I mean, it's kind of morbid to really think about, but either way, why do we just get off Yoshi's back? Just ride him to the next door. I know in Mario World, of course, you left Yoshi outside of castles and haunted houses, so I'm sure that's what they were going for, but still, it's just really odd that you even see him when you return to the castle. Why not just have him not appear when you actually take the pipe back? Though I do think it's kind of funny that the starting point is in Antarctica, so I guess that's where Yoshi's would actually be from. And since we haven't really explored every, I guess, inch of Antarctica, I guess we haven't just found the Yoshi village that's located there. So get to exploring, everyone. Head down to Antarctica, try not to freeze, and find the hidden Yoshi village. Regardless of finding the items, I'm sure you could probably tell that the city that we're in, due to the architecture, was Russia, so we are now in Moscow, including one of the items being the ballet that we have to return, which makes sense. Also, Luigi would be racking in the dough during the course of the game because he earns a lot of extra money from locating all these items and returning them. Though the entire plans of the Koopa Troopas still is pretty weird to throw artifacts or places into bags and then just walk around the place you stole them from and hope that no one finds you and takes them and returns them. If they were smart, they would have just given the bags off to other enemies, like Goombas or Lakitu, and just have them deliver the items and get the money reward for delivering the items back, and then share the money amongst the different Bowser minions. The third item left that we have to return here is the cathedral. Ivan the Terrible built the church, and then we have to say how big the central structure is. Absolutely thrilling. But either way, once we have answered those two trivia questions, now we just have to backtrack our way to the pipe. Usually throughout playing, I was able to kind of figure out the best way to get back to the pipe so that I could try to get out of the cities. Thankfully, it's pretty easy to know where the pipe is since it is the blue one with the pokey in it. I love that the pokey just immediately retracts itself once you get near it. It'll only do that if you've actually found all the items, though. If you try to go back, you won't be able to leave a city until you've located and returned all the items. Next up is the final city for the first floor here, located in Mario is Missing. We're going to start off by running over to the left and then going down several streets in a row till eventually we come to the location of where one of the Koopa Troopas is. Even after playing through the game a couple of times, I end up sometimes misplacing where the Koopa Troopas are. Of course, I could pull up the map to get a better idea of where they're located, especially on the street itself, whether they're behind me or in front of me. But pulling up the map and actually opening it seems to take a while. It's not just one button press that you can do to instantly pull up the map, which would have been much more convenient in the way it's handled. But either way, eventually I'm able to find the street that has a couple of the items, and then I can pull out the old globulator and get Yoshi to my location. As I make it later on, I'll just be pulling and getting Yoshi as soon as possible. You actually do travel a bit faster if you are on the back of Yoshi. If you didn't know what city we were actually in, we are in San Francisco, California, which I guess is represented well. I'm not sure about the city skyline of San Francisco, but overall, seems like a pretty decent representation. First up, we're going to be delivering the Transamerica Pyramid. No surprise also that the Golden Gate Bridge is one of the items that we're going to have to return as well. One street above where we were is where we can locate and deliver the next item. I have to do a bit of traveling, but finally I'm able to get to the street where the location of the other Koopa Troopa is. Like I said, sometimes they end up putting these guys at the far reaches of where you are, and it'll take several streets that you'll have to travel in order to locate them. Thankfully, the Koopa Troopas really don't move other than back and forth on the street that they're located, and like I said before, they're also going to be located in the same spot, so once you kind of have a handle of where they are, you'll have a good idea where you need to go. But since a lot of the streets also look the same, if you don't pull up the map, it can sometimes get a bit confusing on where you end up having to go. Here, we can finally deliver the Golden Gate Bridge, the final of the items we need for San Francisco, and then we can move on. Sometimes, as you may have noticed, citizens will get in the way, and if you try to talk to the information desk, you may accidentally talk to them. They do give you some hints and clues about the locations and whatever about the city itself, but you probably will know that ahead of time or just look it up before you even jump into the game. After completing all of the rooms on a floor, though, you will have to battle the boss. They can't hurt you or damage you in any way. All you have to do is jump on their head several times and they'll be defeated, and then you can move on to the next floor. All of these boss fights are the exact same. Honestly, the hardest part is just landing on their head because they will sometimes immediately turn around when you're about to land on them and have you just miss by a hair. Either way, once he's defeated, we move up to the next floor where we get to continue the process of going through and traveling to all these beautiful cities. As you've probably also noticed, on some buildings, depending upon what city we're in, they will have lettering in the language, of course, that you're in. So that's another cool little addition that just makes you be able to tell or get an idea of what city you're currently in. If you weren't able to tell from the language on the buildings and just the overall architecture, we are actually in Athens, Greece, which is definitely a city filled with history and just lends itself to a game like this where you have multiple different types of artifacts and history that you could find and locate in order to deliver. So, of all the cities, this one definitely makes sense to include in here as far as the items and just the amount of items. In fact, you probably could have done a couple of things for Greece and it still would have had more items that you could have done for landmarks and other things like that. After delivering the brass plaque to its correct location, continue down the street, and then we're going to go up to the next street above. Once here, select the correct artifact, as of course it'll default to the beginning once you've given one of the items, and now we can deliver the next one. At any point, though, if you don't know what item to deliver or which one you need, always you can look up the information at the information kiosk and you'll get a newspaper kind of article giving you more information. So if you're interested in the historical and educational parts of the game, that is included. Thankfully, the other item that we have to deliver here in Greece is located right next to the one, and the location of the pipe is thankfully not too far from where the last of the item kiosk was, so we can move on to that next city. From this point on, I'm going to start actually bringing the Yoshi to me as quickly as possible, just because it does allow me to move a little bit quicker, and I've played the game enough that I know where all the locations of the cities are. This one is Argentina, which is another one of the more obscure ones that's located here, and I do like the way it's all set up. I'm not sure if Argentina actually looks similar to this in any way, but it's still a pretty cool looking setup overall. Doesn't take me long, thankfully, to find actually 2 of the items, and one of which I can deliver right away to the right of where I just found those items, so I can drop that one off at its correct spot, and then move on to the next. I do find it a bit satisfying and fun to land on Koopas, so a lot of times, even if I don't need items anymore, or if just a Koopa's passing by, if I know it's not even going to contain anything, I'll just jump on its head because it's fun. There is that nice little sound effect and a puff of smoke when you just destroyed a Koopa Troopa. Normally, of course, if you jump on one of them, they would just go into their out-of-shell form, and you could actually kick the shell around, but unfortunately, you can't do that with the Koopa Troopas that are located here in Mario is Missing. To the left on the street is not only the other item that we need, it's also the location of another one of the information kiosks. After dropping off the Boladoros, we now can move on to that last information kiosk and deliver the final item here for Argentina. After dropping off the historical flute to its correct location, we can now drop down a couple of streets and head over into the pipe and move on to the next city. Next up is actually the continent of Australia, and you actually get 2 locations on the globulator map. You actually have Perth on the left side of Australia, and then you'll have Sydney on the right side, which is the city in question here. Though I do find it cool that they even had 2 locations in Australia. I guess growing up, I only really knew of Sydney, and that was mostly due to when the Olympics finally got there. Everyone knew Sydney, Australia. Either way, bring Yoshi here. It's a very quick trip for Yoshi, and now we can start working on finding those items here. Since it's Australia, it's no surprise what the items end up being for the most part. It's just also kind of funny what one of them ends up being that we have to find. Sydney's a definitely complicated city for us to travel throughout here in Mario is Missing. It's a bit of a pain to kind of locate where everything is and actually travel throughout, as it's pretty spread apart in comparison to some of the other locations that we've been traveling to. Here we can drop off the first of the items here onto Bondi Beach. Of course, as you may have noticed, the other item that we had to get here was a koala, of course, because it's Australia, so you had to get a koala. Either it was going to be that or a kangaroo. But either way, just the fact that they had a koala in a sack, those things are mean, and I can just imagine if you try to put a koala into a sack, it's going to fight you and claw your face off, if at all possible. The second one of the item locations, we can drop off the Opera House music sheet. One of the more recent artifacts or locations that's in the game, since this was actually from the early 70s is when the Opera House was built. And then the zoo, which is the location for the koala. I can just imagine trying to hand over this angry koala to this information person and be like, here you go, here's an angry, mad koala that's been located in a sack for the last, like, who knows how long. rack up my points, and now we get to move on to the next location here, as we have 2 more cities to travel to here on the 2nd floor of Bowser's Castle. You may have been able to easily tell right away that this is a city in Mexico. It has the cactuses and stuff, so it was either going to be there or some town in Texas. I guess they could have had a Texas town for all the cactuses and all, but either way, it is Mexico City that we now get to travel to and throughout. Not really surprising just because of what you would think of with Mexico, but there are piñatas hanging out inside of the windows. And there's a few other things as well that clearly indicate where we currently are, though there is no writing on any of the buildings. I do find it also funny in the game that every citizen, no matter what part of the world you're in, also pretty much looks identical to one another. No matter where you are, everyone has the same clothing and everyone looks the exact same. It would have been nice if they at least had done a little bit of changing when it came to the citizens, but I guess that would have taken a bit too much effort for the game. Here we get to deliver the fine art catalog. I do like that they have a question here about the art of Mexico, and they actually mention a couple of Mexican artists, which is kind of cool. Some great artists, definitely from Mexico, and something that I wouldn't have expected to come up as a question. When I first played the game, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool that that's actually one of the questions that they ended up asking. We drop off that 3rd and final item, head back, and head to the castle for one more city here on the 2nd floor of the castle. The last city was Mexico, and now we have to go a pretty good distance away from that as we are actually traveling to Paris, France. Paris is definitely one of those cities that if I could visit and travel the world at all would be one of my stops for absolutely for sure. I love the history of France, and I love the architecture, food, and just some of the landmarks. Of course, Eiffel Tower is immediately what's going to come to mind, and no surprise that that's one of the things that we're going to have to be grabbing in this game. Surprising it's not the entire Eiffel Tower that ends up being captured, it's just the flag at the top, but either way we get to deliver and get some trivia about the actual Eiffel Tower itself, and then we have the Eternal Flame left to deliver to its location before we finish up Paris, France. The only thing good about this location for this one, it is right next to where we actually entered from, so dropping off the Eternal Flame, we can get right into the pipe and move on to the next floor after, well, we defeat the boss. I guess you could call it a boss. Either way, it's the only kind of, like, action we really will get to do here. And this fight is the exact same as the one we just completed. You just have to jump on his head several times. He does move, I think, a little bit faster, but his movements are the exact same. We'll try to run away a lot of times when you're trying to directly jump on his head, so you want to do really short jumps. That way you'll have a better chance of actually landing on him. Once he's defeated, go through the gate at the end and move on to the next floor, where you can see Roy's picture located above the doors. The good news, though, is this is the final city that we have to travel to. This is the final floor, starting off with, of course, the major U.S. city, New York, one of the two cities that's located, though there are other ones on the map that we could have possibly been locations. This also, of course, has the infamous King Kong item that we actually end up having to find and return. Still kind of weird that that's one of the things that they decided to do for New York. Now, many different versions of Mario is Missing were released. It was released, like I said at the beginning, on the NES, Super Nintendo obviously, and also on PC. And actually, the computer versions of the game actually feature more cities than the other versions of the game. So in fact, if you're playing it on computer, supposedly there's actually even more cities for you to travel to and deliver stuff. I'm sure the gameplay doesn't get any more thrilling or anything like that, but it is longer in case this game doesn't quite do it for you and you're craving some more. You can look up the computer versions of Mario is Missing in order to quench that thirst. Of all the edutainment Mario titles, though, the only one that I played more than a few times and didn't mind as much was Mario Teaches Typing, but even that was just a very poor game for the most part. Travel all the way down this large street where we can actually find the location where we're going to deliver the Statue of Liberty. No surprise that that would be one of the items also located here for New York. And once we're done, now we just have to travel our way back and we can head off to the next city on our tour of the world here. Next up is the second city that we traveled to in South America, just north of the city we were in Argentina, is Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. If you have played this game up to this point, you've probably definitely gotten used to it. You're probably getting through the cities a lot quicker, and you've also probably become quite bored at just the entire experience overall. I think if they just speeded things up a bit, and maybe there was a little bit less to it, or just a few little changes, it actually could have been a halfway decent edutainment title. But just as it is, as a kid, I struggled to really figure out what, if anything, I was actually doing. And I was one of those kids that actually ran in and played multiple versions of the game, the NES version as well as the Super Nintendo version, though I didn't actually buy them or beg my parents to get them. Thankfully, I did rent them first. I didn't have any relatives that saw Mario and were just like, here, it's a Mario game, you're gonna like it. Thankfully, I didn't have that happen to me, so I had plenty of decent birthdays and Christmases that I got actually usually pretty decent games back in the day on the old retro systems. I will say though that I actually do like Mario's Missing for the SNES better than Mario's Time Machine for the Super Nintendo. This game's a lot more quick, a lot more fast-paced, a lot easier to actually figure out what you're supposed to do. Mario's Time Machine, at least the SNES version, is pretty convoluted with like having to pick the correct year and just everything that's ended up being involved. The NES version of Mario's Time Machine was at least a little bit more enjoyable to play overall. It'll take a little bit of backtracking, but finally I make it to the pipe, and now we can move on to the next location. Next up is one of the more futuristic looking cities in the game. Just the entire like way all the buildings and all are set up. It's kind of interesting and more standout-ish than some of the other ones. And in fact, it actually is Tokyo. Maybe it's just because of the color scheme of using a lot of the blue on the buildings, and just overall, it seems like one of the cooler looking cities that is represented here. I mean, none of the cities are really a great representation of what they actually look like, but Tokyo definitely stands out. The three items here in Japan are also pretty interesting choices. You have a lantern, you have a sumo apron, which I guess that one makes a little bit of sense, and then you also have Buddha's orange. Of all the things related to Buddhism and whatever you could have chosen, it's just the fact that it's Buddha's orange is what ends up being the item of choice here. Here we get to drop off the sumo apron and get a couple of questions, of course, about sumo when doing so. The third and final item, though, we're going to be dropping off is the lantern at the Sensoji. I'm probably saying that completely wrong, but either way, the temple there. And once we have dropped it off, we now just have to head back to the pipe, and we have only 2 more cities left to go before our journey in Mario is Missing is finally complete. Next up is a city that doesn't really surprise me that would be included, but is Cairo, Egypt. Of course, with all of the structures in Egypt, we'll have to return the Sphinx, the Great Pyramid, and then a gingerbread clock, which is something that I actually really didn't know anything about prior to actually playing the game, I have to admit. Thankfully, 2 of the items are located right on the same exact street. We were able to get 2 of them, kill 2 Koopa Troopas, and easily grab a hold of those. Unfortunately, I do have to do a little bit of traveling, though, to get to the last item that we need to grab. Finally, though, after I was able to find all of the artifacts, I now just have to switch to the correct one and drop it off here. Thankfully, right after we have to drop off the item for the Sphinx is also the place for the Great Pyramid, so we get both of those items taken care of, and now we only have to travel and deliver one more item here in Cairo. After we drop off the gingerbread clock, we get our money, and now we can head back to the castle and travel to the next location. Thankfully, though, this is the final city that we have to travel to, and it is good old London, England, which has plenty of things, of course, that could be associated with it. We have the crown jewels, the bust of Shakespeare, as well as the clock of Big Ben, or the minute hand, I think, of Big Ben ends up being the item that we have to return. Of course, 3 historical items, as well as you probably could have come up with a few more that could have potentially been items for us to find located here in London. The first item that we found is very easy to just drop right off at its location. Now we have to track down the rest of the things that we are currently missing on the next street is the next one for us to find. The final one that we need to find is actually not too far off from the other information kiosks that we need to go to. So either way, not too much more traveling that we'll have to do in order to finish up the game. After finding the other items we need, stop by this information kiosk and drop off the Shakespeare bust. Get some information about the abbey in which it is located. And now we only have one more item left to go. Here's the location of Big Ben's information kiosk. Drop off that minute hand for the giant clock, and now we can head back and take on Roy before completing the game. Just like the other boss battles here, or whatever you want to call them in Mario is Missing, we just have to jump on Roy's head. I don't think he's even any faster than the last ones we dealt with. Just do little short jumps as he likes to immediately, just like the others, try to get away from you. Those little short jumps will definitely help you out. Then, head into the door and the game is over. You don't even have to do a final boss fight against Bowser. You can just sit back and enjoy the ending to Mario is Missing. So there you have it, Mario is missing for the Super Nintendo. Is it the worst edutainment game ever? No, it's far from that. It just needed a bit more. What makes a great edutainment game is not just the information and the educational value that the game holds, but also having fun gameplay that at least engages a player to make the learning that you're getting forced to pretty much do, at least makes that more enjoyable and easier to retain within your brain. I think it's cool that they decided to use Mario in one way or another to try to teach kids things, as it made sense, of course, for the early 90s. I just think they could have used more polish and just better overall gameplay to drive home those educational points. After the end rolls up the screen, it then fades away and goes back to the beginning of the game, and if you really wanted to, you can start the experience all over again. But with that, that will wrap up this episode of Play It Through. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a thumbs up or commenting down below. Now if you enjoyed this play it through, be sure to check out the one I did last week for Versus Super Mario Bros. Basically an arcade-only version of Mario that was actually a lot harder, with added levels that ended up being in Super Mario Bros. 2, the Japanese version, not the one we ended up getting here. Either way, I also need to thank all the members of my Patreon. You guys are keeping this channel alive through all the issues of copyright and claiming and everything like that. You guarantee that I'm able to keep doing videos no matter what. Those monthly pledges really do make the big difference in allowing me to keep doing these play-it-throughs, reviews, and everything else amongst the Cornshaq channels. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching, all your support, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.